Hi, welcome. What is Homestand? Well, Homestand is a game I've been working on ever since last August, and it is a multiplayer survival mixed with conquering sort of game. And it's a game meant to be about getting your team together, surviving inside a house, going and conquering other players' bases until you are the last person standing. Homestand. So with Homestand, when you first start inside the game, there's different steps that you're going to want to follow. So at first you'd of course want to find a base and then barricade it up using boards or even doors, and then soon other players are going to want to come and try to invade your base, and then it's your job to try to stop them and defend your core and take a stand at your home. So the other players reach inside of your base and they destroy your core. It's the end of the game for you and you are eliminated. So what are the different skills that help me produce or help work on this video game? Well, I'd say there was three main ones. There was the Minecraft animations, there was also modeling for Project Halo, and then there was visual effects from Jordan Lost, which is a film that we worked on.
What about us?
When I come back, I'll take care of you guys.
What about now?
For now, you're just gonna have to do without me.
Back in grade 8, we had this project called Jordan Lost, and there was one shot where a jet flew over, and there was also some shots where there were CG soldiers that were walking by, and I remember that I had to model the CG soldiers, and David had to model the jet, and this definitely helped us out with being able to model characters and modeling props within a CG environment, and that applies to video games. Movies Edge animation helped me work on parkouring animations, so I looked at a lot of parkour on the internet and came up with some moves, and this helped out because I was practicing complex animations that allowed me to be able to make the animations that are necessary for any video game. Such as running. There's a lot of running inside video games which directly correlated from the Miner's Edge video. There was a lot of running animation in that video to running, jumping animations inside of Homestand. Project Halo. Project Halo was a very long Hi, Mom. Project Halo took a very long time to make because it was one of the most ambitious projects that me and David ever tackled. And it had tons of assets, and this, I would say, is definitely, it kind of took all of the previous ones they worked on and basically put all of the skills to the test. There was modeling of assets like Halo Spartan models, there was modeling of vehicles, and there was even some animation work that I did in order to make a fully made video. So Project Halo helped out make Homestand, because when you're making animations and you're making modeling and you're making textures and all this different stuff in a CG environment, that's basically what a lot of video game development turns out to be. One of the next things that kind of caught me for a little bit of inspiration about like what I should be putting next in my game is that I talk a lot about being able to take real parts inside the world and then being able to put that inside of the game. Well, there's a Humber Bridge inside of Toronto, that's where I live, and I was walking on it one day and I'm like, well, this is a really cool bridge, this bridge is massive. It'd be really cool to put inside my game, but what happens if I could play with what I could never do inside the real world? So I got to work on designing a physics simulation for basically the destruction of the bridge. And it wasn't just a simple fracture it into multiple different parts and then have it fall on the ground. I made sure that it would break apart piece by piece to kind of build suspense and whatnot. So building the Humber Bridge from the real world and putting it inside the game was another really cool idea, because it allowed me to take stuff that real world monuments that are inside the real world and be able to do what you would never be able to do inside the real world, which is of course blow it up, and then have that actually inside the game. So that's another very cool feature of Homestand. So ultimately it came down to the TTC, the Humber Bridge, as well as those conversations that I had with my friends back in grade 8 that started to develop the ideas for making Homestand. And now we're going to be taking a look at the first early development processes of New Homestand, which are the test levels. So the test levels were it was a very simple map, a respawner on either side of the map, and both players would spawn in their respawners. And the whole idea of the very first test levels was that if you can break inside of their doors and destroy the respawner, then once the respawner's gone, the player's gone. That's how you survive inside the game. So you have to defend it no matter what. And so this very first test level showed me the very base game mechanics that I would later on build Homestand off of. After playing the minimum viable product with my friends, it wasn't long before we started to realize all the different issues that arise when developing a game like this. Namely, I mean, obviously one would be glitches. That's going to happen with any game. 2, the world wasn't big enough, meaning that we need more assets, 3D models inside of the game. And not only that, all the characters' faces were completely the same. They were blank, like they had no faces on them, and every single character looked the exact same, and there was no naming of the characters. So you would never be able to tell your friend from an enemy inside the game. So I set out to go and fix those issues in the next iteration of Homestand. Pretty soon after the play test of the minimum viable product, I had to find some solutions to the problems that arose after the playtest. And one of the most biggest and time-consuming was definitely the fact that we needed a bigger world in order to play in. And so for the solution, I hired David. Homestand, working on Homestand all day long. Homestand. David, have you gotten that train finished for me yet?
Oh yeah. Doesn't that look like a train to you?
David, I thought I asked you to make the train 2 weeks ago. That's a box on the screen.
Look at this green box in front of these 2 boxes. This is art. This is beauty. You should be amazed with what I've done.
No, David, that's not a good take. That's a box. I assigned this like 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks! And what have you done? You made a box in 2 weeks. We're on a deadline here, man. A deadline. It means we gotta get stuff done before we die. And at this rate, we're never gonna get anything done.
Alright, listen to me. I promise you, for the next model, I'll get it done. I'll definitely get it done, alright?
Okay, David, we're gonna need a plane. It's gonna be long, windows along it, so you can see out of them. And you're gonna need lots of detail in there. You're gonna need complicated details. Like you're gonna need seats with the seat rests. You're gonna need the floor. You're gonna need the canopy. You're gonna need the everything that a plane has. You're gonna need it. You need to model that. You need to buy 2 weeks from now. That's the goal. That's the deadline. 2 weeks. We need a plane, David. Can you do that?
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. 100%. Come in 2 weeks and you'll see a plane.
Great job, David. I can't wait to see this plane in 2 weeks. All right. Call you soon, man. Plane in 2 weeks. Video games.
Playing. I have 2 weeks to finish that.
Video games, video games, video games,
Creating the assets for Homestand is such a tedious and laborious task. It all starts with the reference images, so gathering the reference images. Kalen would come up to me and he would hand me in all the asset information and all their respective reference images. I would have a look, careful look at all the angles, and then at that point, once I feel confident in the models and the asset, I move on to modeling. So modeling in 3ds Max. I first start out by blocking in the general form of the shape. I may start with boxes or 2D lines. I block out the shape, rough it out. Once I have the general form, I move on to the closer details, the smaller details. I block in those, and then at that point, you're fully done modeling. Now texturing the asset. So once you are satisfied with the model, with how it looks, texturing involves just looking at your texture libraries, thinking of how the material is made up of that asset. Maybe even going outside, shooting your own textures. For example, a concrete wall, going on Google Images, just gathering a bunch of textures, and then at that point you have your textures. You have to make sure that the model has UVs. You may do a quick UV mapping or unwrap UVW, and then at that point I just go in and apply the textures to the object and make sure they look nice. I may composite a few textures, and that's the process. That's texturing the model. Okay, now you have model and textured the asset. You've pretty much completed it, but one last thing you have to do is don't forget the normal maps, as Kalen told me. So I use Crazy Bump. I open that up. It automatically generates the normal maps for me, or even bump maps. And once that's done, I apply it to the model, and I now exporting the model and giving it to Kalen. So I just export it out as an FBX format, and then I give the asset to Kalen, and finally you get to see your asset in the game, and at that point you feel like really satisfied just looking at your asset, being able to interact with it, and being able to play with the asset inside the engine. So that's
Right now, the main features of the game in the new iteration of Homestand is we have a character customization system. So you're able to type in your name, you're able to customize how your character looks, so you can identify your teammates. A second feature is the classes system. There's 4 different classes in the game at the moment. There's the parkourist class, which allows you to be able to run up to obstacles, to be able to climb up walls, be able to avoid people much more easier. There's the assault class, which is where instead of enhanced agility, you spawn with a powerful weapon. And then the third class is the money man, which gets resources much more faster. And the last class is the homestead class. Instead of spawning inside the world where you're a victim to all the other players, you spawn safely inside of your apartment building. And so does all the other people that pick the homestead class. And what's special is that this apartment building called Ponzi's Palace is locked off to only the homestead class people can enter. And so it kind of fosters teamwork because all the people in the homestead class can choose to work together and fend off anyone else. So it kind of turns into this like survival game against all the other players around the world who want to break into Ponzi's Palace. So for the next couple months, I plan on furthering the development of my game. And the ways I plan doing that is by bringing in an inventory system. I also plan on implementing a matchmaking system to make it much more easier to make games. As well as, I also plan on learning a program called Substance Painter, which allows you to be able to create custom textures for video game props and that will enhance the feel and the overall look of the game. And the end goal is to be able to post this game to Steam. But before I ever got to the dreams of even thinking about posting this game to Steam, I actually went through quite a bit of failure. There were times where I would lose weeks worth of progress because the whole entire project got corrupted and I just had to throw it out and start all over again. There are other parts where I would try to cook or bake out the game to be able to send to my friends, and no matter what I would try, it would always fail, and there was some sort of code that I was overlooking and hadn't found yet. But every single time a problem like that arose, I was persistent about it, and I made sure I didn't give up. And I actually was able to overcome most of these setbacks and errors and all these things. And so I'd like to say that if there's one thing that I learned from working on this video game for the past more than a year, I would say that you only fail once you stop trying.